been having this awful nightmare for the last 2 months. By user Sinful Banan. Same dream every night for 2 months. The dream starts with me standing outside an old building. Upon first glance, it appears to be an abandoned hospital or asylum. It looks as though it could have been a rather luxurious hospital with a long gravel path that meanders up to the front entrance. It looked familiar, like I had been there years before, but I know that I had never seen it in my life. The years had not been kind to the building, with the whole thing appearing to be in severe disrepair. Most of the windows looked to be either smashed or close to falling out, with piles of glass collecting directly below them. The piles seemed almost too big to be caused solely by the windows, but there didn't seem to be any sign of trespassing for at least the last half of the century. It didn't even look like there had been anyone on the premises to maintain it. The fence used to keep out unwanted visitors, or keep in whatever used to be inside, was at least 3 meters tall and in need of repair. It was rusted and looked as though it could crumble under even the slightest weight or slightest movement. When the building was still in use, it probably would have done its job rather well, but now it was safe to say that it wouldn't have been helpful. At the base of the fence, there had been several attempts to dig underneath. I couldn't tell whether something had tried to get in or out, but the soil was recently disturbed and the hole was big. Big enough to fit a large animal or small person, though the scratches in the soil made me doubt the former. They were small and shallow, and it was clear they had been digging for a while. The gate was quite a bit taller than the fence, with 2 large decorations towering over visitors on either side of the gate. The decorations didn't fit with the style or material of the fence. They were large stone crows perched on top of a metal sphere that connected to the fence and gate. It felt as though they had placed themselves there, or at least were put up there a long time after the contractors built the fence. The perplexing thing was how their feet seemed to perfectly fit around the metal spheres. It took very little effort to push open the gate and begin walking up the gravel path, and it seemed like the only part of the entire premises that was well kept. There were no weeds poking up through the stones, nor did they appear to be dirty or mossy. It took a while to walk up to the hospital. I probably could have cut across the grass, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. It felt disrespectful somehow. So instead I followed the winding path to the front entrance. I noticed the glass piles again. It was clear now that the piles were not just from the windows. There were syringes and broken beakers mixed in with the piles, as well as a wheelchair and an old hospital bed, both of which were rusted and falling to pieces. I tried not to pay much mind to the piles of junk and forced myself to walk up to the front door. It had been propped open using a large plant pot and had been dragged outside, which was strange considering it was cold and windy outside. It was easy to see inside the hospital from where I was standing. It was light and welcoming, a complete contrast to the exterior. One of the first things that could be seen was the receptionist's desk, decorated with a small vase of flowers, a relatively new computer, and hand sanitizer. Behind the desk was a petite, blonde lady dressed in a nurse's uniform. She was young, perhaps mid-20s, with large round glasses that made her face seem friendly and kind. Before I had managed to walk through the door, she started smiling. She had a wide smile that on the surface seemed genuine and kind. However, the more I stared, the more her grin twisted into a condescending, false smile. I made my way through the entrance, walking slowly, as if I didn't want to go too far in, just in case I needed to make a hasty retreat. The receptionist was patient, never dropping her fake smile, and the closer I walked to the desk, the more details I could see on her face, or lack thereof. She had no eyes, no nose, or any other defining facial features, just glasses and a smile. She said nothing as I approached her, only pointing to a small corridor to the left of the building. Looking up at the sign above the corridor, there was a sign that read, Charlesworth Ward, Psychiatric Inpatients. Having no idea why I needed to go to that apartment, I obliged, slowly walking towards the sign. As soon as I take my first step down the hallway, I turn back to look at the receptionist. She's still sporting the fake polite smile as she stares directly at me. I see everything around her changing to show a decaying and broken version of the area I was just in, with pieces of plaster and glass falling onto the floor, walls crumbling, giving a view of the path and front gate. It was as though the building had changed back to how it originally was. Except for the plant pot, I was no longer there and the doors were tightly shut. I had no choice but to continue my way down the hall. There were several rooms with large windows that allowed me to see into them. Every room had only a bed inside. There were no drawers or tables or chairs. The first room contained someone sitting in the bed, legs hanging off the side. They hung their head in their hands, and all I could hear was a faint sobbing sound coming from the room. Most of their body was covered with bandages that gave almost no clue as to the identity of the patient. The only thing that I could recognize was a tattoo on the inside of the right arm. It was a dragon that wrapped around the forearm of the patient. Instantly I recognized him. It was my brother. I could feel my eyes well with tears as I looked helplessly at him. I was unable to speak or communicate with him in any way. He simply wouldn't hear me. I had no other choice but to walk away. The next room had a patient that was connected to a life support machine, with the only sound being that of the vital signs monitor that maintained a slow, steady, beeping sound. The sound was quite loud when I reached the room. Looking closer to the person in the bed, I realized it is my mother. Unconscious on the bed, not moving or showing any real signs of life. She seemed to be laying there peacefully, but it hurt to see her in that condition. I couldn't bear to watch it, so I walked to the next room. The patient was in the same condition as my mother, hooked to life support, giving no indication as to whether they are still alive. It's a dear friend of mine in the bed this time. I started to panic more, almost running down the corridor, quickly glancing into each room as I passed. Every room had someone I loved dearly, family and friends alike, all laying in the beds down the hallway. The faster I run, the louder the beeping gets, and there's a heavy, sinking feeling in my chest that makes it harder to breathe. I felt as though I've been running forever, but the exit at the end of the corridor wasn't getting any closer. If anything, it was getting further away. But I couldn't turn back as the entrance had fallen apart by this point. I had no choice but to keep moving through the seemingly endless rows of rooms and life support machines. Eventually I made it to the end. I sprint through the exit, continuing down the path and away from the building, not once turning back. The sooner I made it out of this place, the better. Once I felt as though I'd made it to a safe distance from the hospital, I stopped to catch my breath. Only then did I turn to look at the old hospital. To my horror, the entire thing was ablaze. There was no explosion that could have caused it, nor any other indication as to how the fire could have started. My only thought was that the people I loved were still trapped inside. They had almost certainly been claimed by the inferno. Stood right up against the fence was the receptionist from before, except her whole face has changed. She's no longer smiling. She has a look of absolute indifference as she stares blankly at me through the gaps in the fence. No words were exchanged as I continued to stare at her, tears streaming down my face, a feeling of shock and nausea resonating throughout my body.